Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this joint seminar about the Central Anatolian Neolithic, which is going to be given to us by Professor Güneş Duru from Mimar Sinan University, who's come across from Turkey, both to speak to us and also to a conference which takes place at the Institute of Archaeology tomorrow and the next day about the changing archaeological theories over the last 50 years. And of course, Anatolia, the research which is done in Anatolia has an absolutely key part in the development of archaeology globally. So it really is an important event, and we're very, very honored to have such a distinguished speaker with us today. So thank you very much for being with us. I have no particular announcements on behalf of the Anglo-Turkish Society this week, so I think we should just turn straight to our speaker and welcome him.
Thank you, David. Thank you, all of you, and thank you for the community. I mean, before anything else, I just would like to say myself and the nature of my work. I'm an archaeologist, but I'm a prehistorian and someone who studies the vast straits of human history that unfold before the invention of writing. This means I work a field that cannot rely on written text and must instead piece together pass-through material remains and environmental clues and scientific analysis. So prehistory, its very nature demands innovative methods and interdisciplinary collaboration. But beyond the academic dimensions, I also see this work as carrying a political and human responsibility. In exploring early human societies, I seek not only understand how people lived, but also to reflect crucially on the ways that we live today. So prehistory offer powerful tools to question assumptions, challenge dominant narratives, and imagine more diverse and sustainable features. And over 11,000 years ago, the hunter-gatherers in upland regions from Anatolia to Red Sea and began transformative experience, agriculture. The domestication of plants and animals gradually reshaped human societies and environments, laying the foundation for the modern world. Rather than a sudden Neolithic revolution, the shift occurred gradually and in many regions independentally. So archaeologists have identified 10 distinct centers of domestication, including Southwest Asia, China, Mesoamerica, and others, with first occurrence dating between roughly 9,500 3,000 BC. From these centers, agriculture's knowledge and domesticated species spread widely, influencing hunter-gatherer groups across the globe. So wherever it took place, the Neolithic transformation deeply reshaped how people related to each other and to their environment. For millennia, small and mobile hunter-gatherers groups followed seasonal patterns to access wild resources, living and minimal impact to the land. Farming reversed this, and settling in one place to grow crops led population growth and the rise of permanent settlements. Environmental change became pronounced as land, water, and resources were increasingly exploited. With denser population came the need for few ways to manage social relations, leading to more complex social, political, and economic structures that still shape our world today. So Anatolia is one of the most important regions and where the Neolithic transformation first began. As a bridge between the continents, it played a central role in the shift from mobile hunter-gatherer groups to settled farming communities. rich in ecological diversity and located at the crossroads of major migration routes, Anatolia provides ideal conditions for the domestication of plants and animals. Early sites such as Çatalhöyük and Aşıklı in Central Anatolia reveal that communities in the region were among the first to experiment with agriculture, architecture, and social organization, laying the groundwork for the rise of complex societies across Southwest Asia. But before delving into the Neolithization process of Central Anatolia, I would like to take this opportunity on the occasion of my presence here to highlight the scientific collaboration between Turkey and United Kingdom. If there were no British Institute at Ankara, for example, we may have only just begun to discuss the prehistory and Neolithization of Konya Plain and Central Anatolia more broadly. The discovery and systematic studies of the Neolithic in Central Anatolia Plateau, particularly through early excavation at sites such as Çatalhöyük, Canasan, and Pınarbaşı, marked turning point not only in Anatolian archaeology, but in a global narratives about the origins of sedentism and agriculture. In this regard, the role of British archaeological projects, especially those initiated and supported by British Institute of Ankara, has been irreplaceable. So their long-standing focus on Central Anatolia has led the groundwork for the prehistoric sequence we rely on today. Even now, a significant portion of prehistoric research in Turkey, particularly Central Anatolia, continues to be shaped by intellectual legacy and institutional frameworks established through its early British-led initiatives. So we are, sorry,
Who's the second?
Second one, Ian Todd, who discovered Aşıklı. Not discovered, but he published first.
That's what he looked like. I never met him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he was also the field director of Çatalhöyük project. Yes, he's digging together with James Ballard.
Okay.
You might want to drag that down further so you can see.
Okay.
Just hold it, yeah, just drag the whole thing down a bit. Can you do that?
No.
It's not working, okay.
It doesn't work. But never mind. We know it's Ian Todd. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh, there we go, okay,
Perfect.
you go.
Perfect. Okay. There we go. It's nice to see Trevor again, even if only a bit of him.
Okay. Okay. So we are beginning of our research program in Western Cappadocia in 1989, largely to the pioneering efforts, James Ballard, Ian Todd, who were among the first identified, documented to make sense of archaeological regions of the region. You probably know Trevor Watkins.
Very well.
Yeah.
Yes. No, the only one I don't know is Ian Todd.
Okay, so another important point I'd like to mention was a threshold moment in our interaction with the British archaeology and Ian Hodder's invitation to join into the Çatalhöyük excavation. So this invitation not only opened a collaborative space for Turkish archaeologists, but also marked as a significant methodological and epistemological shifts. We, the Istanbul team, and together with Mihriban, worked at Çatalhöyük for 5 years. This experience had a profound impact on the methodology, as we later employed when we started research at Aşıklı 2006. So after years of working with the predominantly German excavation tradition, especially prevalent in dam-related rescue excavation across Turkey since the late 60s, we gradually moved toward the British-oriented archaeological approach. So this shift, not merely technical, but theoretically and foregrounded contextual interpretation, interdisciplinary collaboration, and openness to reflexivist methodologies. These principles embedded in Çatalhöyük project under Holder's direction played a decisive role in shaping how we reconceptualize both excavation practices and interpretive framework, Aşıklı and Balıklı. What began a pragmatic collaboration eventually matured into a paradigm shift, influencing not only our fieldwork, but also we taught about the Neolithic in Central Anatolia. So if we start the Neolithization, how we discovered or how we know in the Central Anatolia, and in the late 50s, Çatalhöyük provided the first major Neolithic data from Central Anatolia, but it dates 2,500 years later than the early Southwest Asian villages, led scholars to the region influenced by migrating farmers. So this weave persisted even after Aşıklı excavation 1989 revealed a settlement 1,000 years older than Çatalhöyük. The remaining chronological gap supported the migration models. However, in 1993, during the Ian Hodder's renewed work, Çatalhöyük, Trevor Watkins excavated Pınarbaşı, an epipaleolithic site dated to almost 14,000 years ago, showing long-distance interaction among hunter-gatherers and reshaping regional timelines. In 1997, excavated at Kaletepe Obsidian Workshop revealed that non-local specialists pronounced sophisticated kind of lithic blades there, and suggesting craft specialization, resource procurement system, and possibly long-distance exchange during the Neolithic. So obsidian was the most popular exotic material among Neolithic communities, living far beyond the Levant, including as far afield as Cyprus. Nearly a decade later, in 2006, this time Douglas Bird from Liverpool University began excavation at Boncuklu, a site contemporary with Aşıklı, about 1,000 years older than Çatalhöyük. The finding revealed early sedentism, subsistence practice, and local interactions, challenging migration-based Neolithization models. The same year, a new phase began at Aşıklı, together with Mihriban Özbaşaran and myself, focusing earlier layers with microscale excavation methods. This approach yielded detailed insights into daily life, architectural continuity, and environmental adaptation. So our understanding of epipaleolithic period in Central Anatolia and its surrounding region is based substantial archaeological data. However, there remains a significant chronological gap between approximately 11,000 and 8,500 years ago, during which our knowledge of the developments in Central Anatolia is quite limited. While we have relatively clear picture of epipaleolithic hunter-gatherer communities before this period and the emergence of fully Neolithic settlement afterward, the transitional phase remains elusive. One of few known and the pieces of evidence from the interval comes from Kaletepe Obsidian Workshop. This suggests that despite absence of well-documented settlements, the region was not entirely isolated. Instead, it appears to have been integrated into broader networks of interaction, possibly involving seasonal mobility and resource exchange, or even small-scale habitation by groups whose material culture has yet to be fully identified. And in 2016, during our careful conducted survey methodology in archaeology is kind of identifying the archaeological sites with the remains and the top on the plateau or valley or mount, you know. The site of Balıklı was discovered, dating to same period as early Aşıklı. Balıklı revealed remarkably different sociocultural features, underscoring the diversity of early Neolithic communities in Central Anatolia. Rather than single path to farming, distinct local strategies emerge from Kaletepe to Boncuklu, Aşıklı, Balıklı. These findings offer a more nuanced view of Neolithization, one marked by coexistence, interaction, and multiple developmental trajectories shaping the region early sedentary life. We have a chronology here. You can see it's the left part, the Western Cappadocia, Aksaray, Niğde, Nevşehir, around this area. And the right part is Konya and Karaman. These are the contemporary sites. So this is the volcanic Cappadocia with which Aşıklı and Balıklı was in interaction. The natural areas in the region support diverse plant communities, generally divided into open woodlands, grassy steppes, and riparian corridors that stretch as green ribbons across the Anatolian plateau. The extensive tracts of rich, moist soil and obsidian sources located within a walk seem to have been the main attraction for the early Aşıklı communities to settle here. Maybe you know this area if you.
Yeah.
It's a volcanic. Well, this is also volcanic ash layers. This one.
Well, Cappadocia, is it really?
Yeah, it is. It's very close to Aksaray. So Aşıklı was occupied between 8,000 and 400 BC and 7,300 calibrated BC. The excavated levels revealed continuous evolution of the settlement with no significant interruption in human occupation. While changes occurred gradually, the pace of community growth accelerated over time. And over the course of 1,000 years, the settlement's appearance underwent a dramatic transformation. Aşıklı exhibits a range of co-evolutionary processes, and within the interconnected space of human environment, human plants, and human-animal interactions. While these dynamics are deeply entangled, each follows its own distinct rhythms, with shift in architecture, building layouts, and settlement patterns standing out as particularly significant. Human-plant interaction is quite a smooth and even tempo, whereas human-animal interaction and specifically shows fluctuating course and throughout the entire settlement. The reorganization involved a major shift in the settlement geometry, architecture, and the ratio indoor to ground level outdoor spaces. This stage was dominated by quadrangular surface structures built of sun-dried mud brick or kərpiç blocks with flat roofs. external areas or open spaces were devoted to communal meetings, and animals were taken out of the settlements. So we also same phenomenon like Çatalhöyük and building continuity. You can see here 10 different building faces, and for example, the fireplace is always in the same spot, and they built the buildings. They use the earlier building phases like the foundation of the next one. So this kind of continuity and we follow in Çatalhöyük and Boncuklu, but for example, in Southwest Anatolian Neolithic communities, we don't follow that much continuity. The building shapes, and orientations always change. It's very rapid change. But in Central Anatolia, we have very gradual change. Towards the very last phases of the settlement, a new format for communal architecture emerged, a separate area here named as a special purpose building area. We call this area its special purpose area. Was at the southern end of the mount. This space was dedicated to activities that reinforcement the collective structure of the community. Ceremonies and feasts were performed here, indicating that our supplied a formal setting, strengthening the ties among community members and likely diffusing the negative efforts of conflicts and disputes. Building groups and neighborhoods emerged around 7,500 BC. And we have a cluster neighborhoods at that level. Double burials emerged at around the same time. A great variety of executive material arrived to the site, and that's level 2. Although slight, there also appeared signals of differentiation among building groups in the stable nitrogen and values in human skeletons in this period. The ratio of consumed meat varies from a household to another. The community most likely gained a new identity as herders, if not farmers. Given the importance of domesticated herds, livestock has likely presented opportunities for generating surplus and perhaps accumulating wealth or social influence. Consequently, capital management seemed to be the main motivation for the newly established life at Aşıklı and likely abandonment of the settlement. So gathering from the wild and cultivation annual plants have tended to develop hand in hand Aşıklı, same as in the forager societies. They gathered wild fruits, nuts, and also collected wood, leaves for fuel, reeds and seeds for basketry and building construction, and herbs and small shrubs for special uses and wild grass fodder for livestock. Poaceae grasses are especially common among the wild plant remains, and they could have been used mainly animal fodder. The wheat assemblage are mixtures of wild and domestic variants in all levels, but the proportion of the latter increased very mildly with time. most human-plant interaction at Ashikli remained fairly stable until the mid-8th millennium BC. Human-animal interactions had distinct dynamics. Much of the early faunal record Ashikli reflects continuation of predation, but a more integrated web of human-animal entanglements was set in motion with the founding of the permanent settlement on the river bank. Some of the interaction were commensal and few development into mutualistic relationship that include domestication. These interactions are distinct in they led to reciprocal adaptive change as a result of strong interdependence between humans and certain other organisms. On the slide, you can see the list of the large prey animals, hares and fish, and small animals that were exploited food and for raw materials. The faunal record revealed a remarkable transformation in meat sources from early settlement through the latest. Caprins, the green bar, compressed only 26% of all prey in the earliest level, but their importance ascended steadily to 92% by the final phases. In addition to hunting them, humans began keeping small numbers of caprins in enclosures between their houses by at least 8,300 calibrated BC. I mean, very beginning of the site. The expedient approach to live meat storage appears to have been one of three means conserving animal products for delayed consumption, along with drying lean, rendering fat and grass from bones. On the right, the pits that were used to store dried meat. I think you can't see because of my face, but there are some pits within the building. Therefore, dried meat store. And all pits contain bones of most meat-bearing parts of animals. And below is one of our members. She also tried to clean. These are the stone boiling pits featured from very early habitation levels. These are for animal pen or a kind of coral. This coral is in English, I think. Coral area. So these are the burnt and wood materials, like a fence, where they keep the caprins. So the management of caprins was not likely the main goal of the community, where the knowledge and the practice of management were learned by doing and passes to each generation. So one archaeological evidence for caprin management comes from the high concentration and major increases of urine salts on the mount. So geologists and the sodium, chlorine, and nitrogen from the earliest level until the next increase from level 5 to level 3. The urine inputs greatly outstrip architectural evidence of human population density in each layer, and thus much was it from livestock. Another evidence comes from the comparative study of pathologies on sheep, astragali. The study demonstrated that intra-articular bone damage is significantly more pronounced in animal living confined to enclosures. Restriction in the movement and keeping animal essentially within the certain boundaries cause advanced damage of the articular bone surfaces. In the course of the habitation, around 8,000 millennium overall joint health improved slightly, implying that the community managed sheep husbandry techniques increasing better. The fits perfectly with the decline of urine inputs from level 3 to level 2, even though the percentage of caprins in the meat diet and continued to increase, which suggests that livestock corrals were moved partly or wholly off of the mount top around this time. So stable isotope studies of sheep bone collagen, meanwhile indicating dietary change in 8 millennium BC, possibly because of they were grazing more in remote pastures rather than just being in the fed local fodder, confirming the herds moved the settlements. And the final remnants of small corals of phytoliths and micromorphological traces of in situ dung layers represent the direct evidence of caprins kept on site. These are the in situ dung layers. These the brown layers you can follow. This thick herbivore dung deposit layers extending more than 25 meters. The intensification in both and density and formality of built environment define the transition from 9 to 8 millennium. The caprin management oriented attitude of the community has been one of the most determined among many that define the fundamental reorganization of use of space and the layout in the beginning of 8 millennium BC. So if we brief look to the architecture remains shows that the earliest phase represents a brief stage of semi-sedentism, perhaps multi-month occupation. And the earliest construction of this phase were comparatively fragile or flexible. They were simply subterranean and semi-subterranean buildings dug into the alluvial field with plaster walls and floors. But then, and you can follow the how building change in time from round structures to rectangular structures, from single room building to multiple room. This is the earliest phase of Ashikla, for example. So. This is the latest phase. So we have very slow, gradual change in 1,000 years without any gap. So these are the early houses. This is a reconstruction. So the next phase represents one set what appear a year-round occupation with permanent buildings, while work parties may have left periodically perform spatial distant tags. The architectural characteristics are semi-subterranean, round but bigger mud brick houses, and residential use of this building is indicated by the consistent presence of hearths, work areas around the hearths, grinding stones, ventilation shafts, pit burials under the floors. The outdoor spaces between the buildings were used for many purposes, including animal penning areas and a variety of food preparation activities, tool making, basket making, preparation, and cereal processing. And so waterland dove structures served for animals based on macromorphological and geochemical vitalist evidence. These spaces contain concentration of herbivore than primary context. So end of the ninth millennium represent a continuation of many of the architectural characteristics of the past, but with significant upticks in the community growth, architectural density, debris accumulation, and the number of animals managed. The semi-subterranean building clusters, animal pens expanded. So this is Balıklı, it's just in the 50 kilometers north of Aşıklı. And Balıklı is the contemporary with the early phase of Aşıklı. They're looking at the same mountain, they're sharing same sources, but they are completely different. So Balıklı had been damaged by bulldozers after we discovered it, and then we start rescue excavation with Nigel Gore and Morris together, and that's two large pits in the center of the settlement, and there was cross sections rebuilt that had originally been numerous round buildings in this area. So as Balıklı community provide us firm evidence for the first time that the community in Central Anatolia integrated with a more distinct geography. What is also important is that the inhabitants at Balıklı were genetically natives of Central Anatolia, just like Aşıklı community, but they are not close, or they are not related. Again, behind the participants, there's a Nenezi and the obsidian sources, just 6 kilometers and they're far from Balıklı. But the Balıklı people, they prefer the Gölüdağ sources one is in the 30 kilometers far from Balıklı. And there's no differences between the quality of the obsidian, just there's a kind of, one is opaque, one is little different kind of obsidian, but the most of the prehistoric communities like Aşıklı, like Boncuklu and Karaman, they prefer Gölüdağ sources. I mean, Nenezi is the secondary source for them. So it is, and there's no the functional and the selection, probably a kind of moda, or they prefer to, or they are seeing each other in the Gölüdağ sources, a kind of interaction and place. So Balıklı dates also 8,300, 7,900 BC. Our preliminary observation indicate dense settlement pattern consisting of building close to each other, but chronologically it's not like Aşıklı. Aşıklı is 16 meters high and 1,000 years without any gap in occupation. But in Balıklı we have very short time occupation, maximum and 200 years or 150 years. So relatively short time period, but their share in the 200 years with Aşıklı and the same region is. So these are the obsidian. This is the Gölüdağ obsidian. You can see the sources and the 30 kilometers to Aşıklı and the 22 kilometers to Balıklı for the Gölüdağ obsidian sources. This is from Acıgöl. You probably know also Acıgöl geologically, one other volcanic area. This is Nenezi obsidian. This is Gölüdağ obsidian. Just different kind of opacity and color. But I mean 92% obsidian came from Gölüdağ, both Aşıklı and Balıklı. So one of the typical tools type at Balıklı are obsidian points. Then they were named as a Cafer point. Cafer point is a molecular coven in the French archaeologists when they were first identified in a Caferi in Malatya is during the rescue excavation in 80s in East Anatolia. And they only found two obsidian arrowheads and that they call the Cafer type of arrowheads. But we found in Balıklı almost 100 and this type of arrowheads. So for example, in Aşıklı, despite the succeeding couple of 100 years, with minimum interaction with the 9th millennium community behavior, and was similar to the Paleolithic community, the community was quite mobile and or intense interaction with other group exotic items such as Mediterranean shells, MR wheat, lentil, a flint plate, and a bipolar technique were either imported or paid by Aşıklı inhabitants themselves. But Balıklı people shows more interaction to us, you know. I will show some other interaction clues, but the Cafer type of obsidian arrowheads probably is we have to call this arrowheads Balıklı type because it's very few in Malatya. So in Neolithization story, always the from east to west, you know, there's always archaeologists use the diffusionist ways to explain to the a kind of acculturation to set the society or agricultural societies acculturated to hunter-gatherer groups. So here we have a different kind of rotation or different kind of story. It is very important for diversities in that time period. So interesting is the similar tools found in Institute and a group of 8. These are from Aşıklı, early levels. So after Balıklı, we are digging Aşıklı for maybe more than 30 years. But after this same year and the year later, we found the basal and the level of Aşıklı, also Balıklı, similar Balıklı type of arrowheads on the floor in institutes. It's a pit burials, pit houses. The structures at Balıklı are quite uniform in size, orientation, form, and arrangement of internal features indicating standard size architectural scheme. They are semi-subterranean pit houses, dug almost vertically into the underlying marl, oval shape, and roughly 5-6 meters diameter, with walls constructed of basalt stones and blocks cemented in place with a rock-hard marl mortar and internal plasterboard. So it's the Balıklı's architectural materials or building materials that fit with the region, because everywhere is the volcanic stones, basalts, for example. And also, if you think about the Central Anatolian and the climatical conditions, or is very heavy snow during the winter times. Mud brick not really usable material. But Ashikli peoples never gave up from mud brick, and they never used in their houses a stone. Everywhere stone. They use the stone only in the special purpose area, like monumental buildings. But in Balıklı, we have a contrast. They only use the basalt stones, and they use the plasters, but they never make Ashikli kind of sun-dried and mud bricks. So most of the building's features are an exterior apsidal projection on the eastern side, and several include ventilation shafts. And so, repeated internal features, including large stone-built or model plaster hearts, series of post holes, something like these are the post holes, and stone cup mortars and clay boxes, and any other domestic features. Buildings were remodeled in the same location over time. One preserves a succession of at least 5 living floors, while others appear to have no more than 2. The absence of doorways indicates that no, this is all one. We also indication about the doorways. And always we have doors and related with the hearts just front of the. For example, it was not here and there, and I will show you a picture, I think, about the doorway later. So the other contrast of the we have 60 burials and from the main occupation, and some of them inside the wall, some beneath the structures, beneath the floor, and we have a different kind of burial customs. And in Balıklı, in Ashikli, in that time period, we have only woman and child burials, but not more than 10. And we don't have any burial gifts in Ashikli, but in Balıklı we have a burial gift with the with burial gift and also without burial gift. For example, when we moved that stone and we found the bodies inside the wall, and these are also burials. So bulldozer damage exposed the cross section of the building and that building. And during the first years of excavation, while cleaning this section, we discovered this multiple burial there under the Asagay. Um, there were slightly different practices. This is they were buried in a rock pit carved into a bedrock of the building floor, and grave goods were not placed alongside the dead, but instead deposited in a separate cache pits dug nearby. These are from the cache pits from somewhere here. These are the burials. This is the cache pit. These are the things we found in cache pits. So we another bulldozer destruction. You can see this is all this area is the bulldozer destruction. So we only able to excavate a quarter of the building, and that had been largely damaged. The floor of this structure had been renovated multiple times, and initially the building was founded on bedrock and the first time, and then they renewed 4 or 5 times. The skeletons we discovered within this building were all primary burials, among them the remains of a newborn and 2 children, pointed to yet another distinct burial practices. In these infant and child graves, we also found grave goods indicating interaction with distant regions. So in the upper phase of the same building, a neonate was buried in a 25 by 30 centimeter oval pit and hocker position. The dense phytalis surrounded the inner boundary of the grave pit. That the infant was placed in a basket and put inside the pit, or that the basket was already in the pit. There's a butterfly-shaped red bead on the ribs on neonate and obsidian blade over this bead. These are the butterfly kind of the beads. The fact that the red colored bead had clear traces of intense use, and the baby was still very young one, indicates that this bead was a transmitted object from previous generations. And a child and the skeleton number 11 to 4 years older and lying in a hocker position. The pit was cut into the floor, the earliest phase of the semi-subterranean building, whereas the building was cut into bedrock. The burial yielded a total of 88 dentalium beads. So the burial yielded at a total, along with the dentalium beads, there's a turquoise again in the butterfly shape bead, and there are also 22 small disc-shaped stone beads around the arm and the hand near the tibia. There's a single black butterfly-shaped stone bead. An obsidian blade was also placed just above the body again of the child. The other one in the child again, and so these are also sister and brother. In 9 years old, the cutting again in the bedrock. So it's located just east of the burial. Is there very close? You can see. And 11th and 47. and two pieces of obsidian blades were placed, and again is butterfly shape and the beads you can see, and dentalium shells and butterfly shaped beads indicate interaction with the Middle Euphrates area. And we don't also have any clue about the beads making here, probably came from somewhere else. We don't have an Ashik also beads making. So it means that, and that community in Central Anatolia interact with more distant geography. What is also important is that the inhabitants of Balıklı and Aşıklı, both communities are genetically and Central Anatolian communities. So in almost every building we encountered numbers of burials, and some primary, some others secondary. So when examined kinship relationship in these burials, we found and only one and the evidence for first degree and the relationship with that kids. But for example, the seven and the individuals in that buildings, they don't have any relationship. So and also most of the bodies the buried without any burial gifts except the kids. Also, this building also strange, and you can see something like sitting position. Some skeletons. We found like sitting position. Probably they packed with something. They just and they left them on the floor. Maybe just before abandonment of the building, or they were keeping the bodies within that buildings. We still working on that. So it's comparing burials with 9th millennium burials at Aşıklı. We don't have any, there's no grave goods. And as I told you before, and we only have the child and woman burials, females burials. But in Balıklı we have all. And we have some grave gods, as I mentioned. And also in Aşıklı we have first degree relationship. And you can see with in neighborhood building within the same building, but also and two buildings just close to each other. We also see the first degree relatives in that level, but maybe we have very few human remains in Aşıklı that from that level. Maybe we also have some other buildings. There's no any first degree relationship, and very difficult to say. These are the family based houses or not. It's very difficult to say that. I just mentioned already, these are the burials, how we found. And probably they packed, it wasn't something probably, and then after abandonment of the building, we found like the scene, it's very dirty. So botanical remains preliminary analysis of carbonized plant remains reflects a local dryland and wetland environment. Cereals and pulses are present only as small numbers, the former mainly represented by gloom bases of gloom widths, indicating dehusking. Some gloom widths are identified as amber, other type of gloom widths. So the fauna from Balıklı is diverse, composed of more or less equal amounts of large and small animals, small game. The small animals are mostly hares and supplemented by fish, birds, and tortoises. The large game are ungulates dominated by wild cattle and wild ass, with lesser amounts anatomically wild sheep, goat, and pig. This focus on hunting wild large game stands out in comparison to contemporaries layer 4 and 5 Aşıklı, which have much higher proportion of sheep and goat. The contrast suggests greater investment in hunting at Balıklı in comparison to Aşıklı, but despite the fact that they were also hunters, they focused on sheep and goat from the very beginning. But although sheep, goat are less common at Balıklı than Aşıklı, their status as managed or wild animals remains uncertain. We never found dung layers in Balıklı as Aşıklı. So probably the Aşıklı people they were more focused on the capital management, but Balıklı peoples didn't. So these are kind of comparison. Aşıklı developed into a long-term dense settlements with evolving architectural system, transition from round to rectangular mud brick houses. It shows clear evidence of permanent habitation and generational continuity. In the contrast, Balıklı appears to have been a more unparalleled settlements, possibly seasonal, with semi-subterranean pit houses constructed with stone and marble mortar. So Aşıklı is the plant and animal domestication were integral from an early stage. Wheat domestication was evident and capital management increased over and time, and with sheep and goat playing a major role in the diet and economy. Balıklı, on the other hand, relied more hunting large wild game such as wild cattle and wild ass, with little evidence of structures animal domestication. Aşıklı had relatively few burials, only women and children, as I told you, with individual placed beneath the house floor. The practice suggests that close generational societies but commercially, Balıklı had numerous burials, including adults of all sexes, with unique traditions such as interment within the walls during the building renovation and separate pits for graves. So Aşıklı is a long-term settlement pattern, indicates socially cohesive group with strong generational continuity, but Balıklı layout and burial traditions suggest a more variable possibility transient community. Together, this site, the district Neolithic Central Anatolia, was not uniform, rather than dynamic interplay, local adaptation, external influences, and evolving socioeconomic structures and strategies. According to ancient DNA data, people in Aşıklı belonging to local communities of Central Anatolia, it's likely that these groups spent the period of climate improvement in the caves, rock shelters in the regions before transitional or settled way of life. So increasing research in the region in early 90s has shown the Central Anatolia was not uninhabited. Moreover, the data included ancient DNA suggested the existence and diversity local hunter-gatherers indicating that the Paleolithic lifestyle was complete in the region. We know that the earliest inhabitants of Paleolithic from Pınarbaşı, Karaman, and then the groups of Aşıklı and Balıklı were mobile communities, open and active long-distance interaction. From the concept of the finds, the Epipaleolithic burial in Pınarbaşı or the arrowheads at Balıklı. In Pınarbaşı burials, something like in the southern Levantine Epipaleolithic, there's an indicator there. In Balıklı is a Cafer kind of points, and small number of worn out beads, we know from the PPNA, Middle Euphrates region. The reason for this interaction of what we know for now must be the Cappadocian obsidian resources. So the communities in Central Anatolia do not have the kind of interaction that would build homogeneous and common characteristic as we see it in Southern Anatolia. For example, this Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and this site, they create a kind of homogeneity because, there were lots of hunter-gatherer groups, they were agglomerated, and this kind of, and the sites, you know. So these sites also construct a kind of homogeneous communities, either with emulation or commonalities or any other behavioral or competitive reasons, you know. And then as in this area, in southeastern Turkey or in the northern Levant, we can see the loss of similarities, and that competition effect is very rapid change in Neolithic communities. But in Central Anatolia these groups, they are isolated communities, you know, they are not, they probably had no that competition system, or they were no reason like the Göbekli, Karahan Tepe, you know, is a kind of agglomerative areas, and will serve or will be a reason of competition. That's why in Aşıklı, in Balıklı, Boncuklu, these are different than, there are some similarities, but they are different. I think that's all. These are both our team. Aşıklı and Balıklı. Thank you.
Stop screen share.
Well, thank you very much indeed for an extraordinarily rich and interesting talk.
Did I manage?
Absolutely fascinating.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Just do it for that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And do a kid at the top as well. Okay, right.
So I think that the contrasting model that you put forward is remarkably persuasive.
Yeah.
And of course, it's great to highlight this diversity of the prehistory of Anatolia in this way, because it so often gets overlooked, and comparative surveys such as yours are not that common, because so often people concentrate on one aspect of the excavation which they're doing at the moment. So it was really absolutely fascinating. Well, people have questions around the book. Please go ahead. I've got some of them. I've asked mine later, so you start, please.
Wondering if you could say something more about this special purpose building. I could see that it was bigger. It seemed to have like a red floor. Can you say anything more about the building itself and what you found in it?
Okay. I give little information about the special purpose area because special purpose areas level is not contemporary with Balıklı, you know. It's later on, and like something like in the last quarter of the Aşıklı, you know. In special purpose area, I think they are in the created an area and solving problems, or they are egalitarian people, you know, and we have lots of clues about their how they try to keep egalitarianism within the settlement. But you know, and with the building clusters, you know, in that period, I think, and they try to keeping community together. They try to create a kind of new concept. You know, we had in early levels, we also have some communal structures, but that communal structures only for food sharing or food storing. But that buildings, and we have two strange buildings. Let's say one is and the almost 100 meter, 100 square meter, and with in the portico buildings. These buildings we have is a very large stones. Maybe they were make exchange within the community, on that large stones. We also have the feasting evidence. You know, for example, they and one cattle and two or three the sheep and goat consumed in one time. You know, it's a big amount of meat to spend to consume, and also we have some ritual indicators like the after that consumption, you know, and they put in the red ochre on the bones.
On the animal bone.
On the animal bones, and then they keep. It wasn't a midden area. I mean, they keep this and the bones. But I didn't mention, and in both Aşıklı and Balıklı, we don't have any figurines like, you know, we familiar from the Southeast Turkey's Neolithic societies or Levantine Neolithic society, or later on Çatalhöyük. We don't have any wall paintings. We have very limited indicators about the ritual, or, you know, is in it with the modern term, you know, and the religion, let's say, yeah. We don't know how was their, you know, ritual work. It's very difficult to say, because if you have a figurines, if you have a kind of, you know, the things like in the Göbekli Tepe and Karahantepe, you can, or Çatalhöyük, there are lots of clues to create a kind of story. But if you don't have anything, you know, and it's very difficult to construct a kind of behavioral or psychological world of this community, you know. So the other building we have in Aşıklı, in the same special purpose area, that times the red lime plaster building. This is again non-domestic building, and they use the pyrotechnology. Pyrotechnology means that they burnt lime. Is very at high temperatures, like a Roman kind of cement. So this kind of building material we know from Levant too. And it's starting the TPNA periods. In even Göbekli Tepe, and there's that kind of floor. In Çayönü, and there's a similar kind of floor. Or in Israel, in Kafr Horosh, there's a similar kind of floor. And this type of in the materials always use the non-domestic buildings in the Neolithic time. So this is also shows us, you know, a kind of interaction started in the later levels of Aşıklı with the other communities, other Neolithic communities. So that building and the 5 times renewed at the same spot again, and sometimes red color, sometimes red and yellow color, sometimes yellow colors. And I think we have 2 or 3 more phases underneath the floor. So this building, and probably for not for all the communities, because that particular buildings were huge, and the red plaster floors buildings only 6 by 6 meters, and the floor is like is a perfect, not really, it shows that probably a kind of temsilci neydi unuttum, candidate or representative of the maybe building clusters, they were allowed to enter that building. And we have channels in that building, and from inside to outside. It shows that a kind of liquid activities, but we also analyze the floor. We didn't find any blood or any other things. But just next to the floor, in external area, we have a large open spaces. Probably they were witnessing, the community was witnessing the things happening inside the building. Like when Pope elected, it's that kind of, but we don't know what kind of liquid they used or for which purpose. It's very difficult to say that. But that special purpose area, like they make a kind of terrace in the building. That area, is a huge social organization and collective work shows us, so we don't know what was their motivation to create this area, but I can say that we have a gravel streets, a kind of separation between the dwelling area and special purpose area. It's almost 7 meters high and 5 meters length. So it means that bring that amount of gravel is not really easy.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? Please.
I just wonder, did you find any instrument like weapons or anything? Was there anything that people seem to basically fought each other or something? Any
Fight,
yeah.
Evidence of
it. No, we don't have.
Weapons.
We don't have.
Mm.
I mean, in Neolithic time, there are lots of different approaches about that, but there is no, it's deliberate indication, violence, organized violence, let's say, it's some communities, they played game, because we can read on skeletons, that kind of fight or violence or war, and there are some clues on the peoples on skeletons, but sometimes could be related with a kind of game. But there are very, very few indication in Neolithic society in Southwest Southwestern Asia. Very few about violence.
May I ask a question?
Please, Colin, go ahead. Nice to see you.
As someone who dug at Jan Hassan 55 years ago, I wish to congratulate you on the astonishing work you were doing at both those sites. I think it's the transformation in the subject and the research is astonishing. I really do. Have you published this in a book form that one can get hold of, or an accessible journal article?
Yes, if you, I will. You have contact with David. I think I will give him and the list of the publication.
Excellent.
We also published an Ashikli's English. We have a monograph. Thank you very much. Actually, is it what David French did in the Central Anatolia?
Well, yes, I
It
was.
is very important because it's David French. He was the very important, especially for interdisciplinary approaches and contextual archaeology. When Mallard dig everywhere,
That's right.
David French was very slowly. He tried to understand the sites.
We were pioneering froth flotation. Do you use flotation to find plant remains?
We are doing. We probably the first and still continuing the contextual archaeology in Turkey. Only are doing that probably. Contextual archaeology, they say. But we first we are the team used first time in flotation archaeobotany till analyzing in Turkey.
And what about
locals?
And what about isotope studies? I think you mentioned them for animal bones, but not for human bones.
I mean, isotopes also is very important, but we have lots of isotope data. But our regulation always change in Turkey. As for example, strontium isotopes. We cannot analyze in Turkey, but the government not allowed to bring abroad for analyzing the human materials. So
because I think for Bonjuklu and Chatal, which aren't that far apart.
They did. Also we did. But I mean, these were the oldest material, oldest sampled, already moved abroad.
So you can't say there were links between Ashukla and Balukla.
We can say what?
You can't say that there were any connections between them.
Ancient DNA say, and they are in both local communities, but they are not relatives.
Right.
But for example, we have to understand, movement. In strontium isotopes is very important for movement of the people. But there's no any sites and the strontium isotope opportunities in Turkey, but we cannot bring the samples out of Turkey because of the regulation. But in Turkey nowadays, the archaeology is very the tourism kind of focus. And they don't. I mean, the archaeologists, they are not arguing that regulation is affecting our interpretation, I said.
Well, thank you. Absolutely superb.
Another question here, please.
Just one big one. Was obsidian the only tool you had for cutting or
Yes.
for arrows or anything? Was there not the only?
Yes, we have a 99. I mean, we have a maybe maximum 20, 25 flints. Only obsidian we have. And even in Ashikla and in Balıklı, they don't use the flint like exotic material.
Obsidian is a tool, cutting tool.
They love obsidian probably.
Obsidian is like a mirror also.
Also, in Chatal, yes, but we don't have any mirror obsidian.
Would you say would you say the transformation from round structures at Ashukla to rectangular is just a function of more enduring year-round settlement?
I mean, it's very difficult questions. We also published about we discussed from round to rectangular transition or transformations, the reasons, and I will also send you that publication together with Ian Kite. Maybe you're familiar to Ian Kite names. 3 years ago. It's very, I mean, probably also social, that transformation. but you know, for example, in Cyprus, they never transformed to the rectangular architecture. I mean, they have a lot of, for example, recent results shows that, and 7,600, 7,800. There's a genetic results shows us, you know, Central Anatolia and Konya Karaman region. There's a link with the Cypriot people, you know, they moved from Konya Karaman, but architecture same, you know, round architecture. They continue to round architecture.
Mhm.
It's very difficult.
Certainly very interesting. But I think Chidam has been patiently waiting. So please, Chidam, we can carry on our discussion, but you come in now.
Unmute.
I have actually written excellent lecture, totally fascinating. Thank you. I did write my question actually. If you look at the comments, this is a very far-fetched question. I was wondering if one should at all suspect sort of an interaction while the Scythians or Iskitler were moving from the Central Asian steppes to the Pontic to today's Ukraine around the same time.
Okay. I mean, I don't have any idea about the Iskitler. And I mean, I can't answer that question. I'm sorry, but you know, I think it's time differences. So, but I don't know really. I can't say.
I'm not an archaeologist. I just read
it's okay.
a
It's fine.
wonderful recent publication by Chris Beckwith.
Yeah.
And I can send you the PDF and some of the things that you're finding out.
Okay.
Sort of.
But there are lots of,
as they were moving across.
Yeah, there are lots of, for example, in Africa, you know, among the different hunter-gatherer groups or the agriculture groups, and they're sharing same geography, and they have a different kind of ritual, different kind of burial custom, different kind of architectural patterns. There are lots of examples like this, but and in archaeology, we have a different kind of, you know, approaches in archaeology, in our archaeological history. You know, we call it the culture historian. You know, that they mostly use the similarities. You know, so that similarities a kind of habitus of Turkey, habitus of archaeology. You know, which I don't like much. You know. So we have to follow the differences. That's why, for example, in Central Anatolia, always interpreted with the similarities. But I mean, last 25 years, results shows that, you know, we had to focus on the diversities or differences. But unfortunately, the Turkish archaeologists, they always, you know, and using the cultural history, and they mostly use the similarities, you know.
Maybe they're following Ekrem Akurgal, that's why.
Yeah.
I worked under Ekrem Akurgal. Yes,
okay,
I know what you mean.
Another problem and shame of Turkish archaeology, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
One more, about the ancient DNA, and you say that's an Anatolian, they're the native people, if you like, the earliest native people. Does that genetic background survive into later periods? Or do those people get replaced?
I mean, you mean nowadays people?
Not necessarily nowadays,
Yeah.
but say sort of Bronze Age or
Okay.
Chalcolithic even.
Okay, yes, yes. There are some continuity, but for example, Çatalhöyük, 1,000 years later than Aşıklı and Balıklı, we have a kind of different genetic groups, coming from the southeast. But this is not a kind of demic diffusion.
No.
A small group or individual. I mean, ancient DNA kind of, okay, is our new tool, but still they are like a cultural historians, they are looking the big, they want to see the big pictures, with the ancient DNA, That's why we focused on the intra-site relativeness or intra-regional relativeness important for us. Otherwise, we will start from Anatolia was the cradle of the civilization, and they came to built the Stonehenge.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a 7,000 years differences, time differences.
Yeah, I know, it's just funny,
Yeah.
but I think that's.
But the people, I mean, both archaeologists and the public, they like that kind of results and stories, of course.
No, I was just thinking in Britain, I'm not big on British
Yeah, I know.
archaeology, but I know there's one point at which they say there was almost a total genetic replacement.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that they continued as part of the mix.
Yeah. But for example, sheep DNA, in Aşıklı, there's a amazing effort about the captive management, and then so we have domesticated sheep. So, and our results shows that again in the Central Anatolian sheep, even we will see it's a very late in China, in that genome, we published 2 papers. I mean, again, it's about the framing of big pictures that I don't like much, but our archaeozoologists, they are very happy to publish that 2 paper, and the sheep, domestic sheep, when disperse other countries or other regions, something like that.
These are very good points. Do you have any questions, Matthew?
No. Quite happy.
I mean, the central thesis you're putting forward is very interesting. And I'm wondering what model we could use, because we could easily say that the Aşıklar people are basically Durkheimian, as far as I can see, and that's what gives you the central ritual which they can all take part in, which gives you the stability. But as far as I can see, the implication of what you say is that the other side, was it Balıklar or Balıklı? Balıklı. It seems to be much smaller, doesn't it?
It is.
It is. So it's probably quite difficult to make a sociological comparison. We can make the kind of comparison that you're doing, but then to generalize that into something which gives us some sociological insight, I think must be very, very difficult. But there were no central areas of ritual celebration in Balıklar, were there? There were just a few houses that people were drifting in and out of. I mean, the only thing it slightly reminds me of is the social organization or the social formation you get in the Yayla. But even the Yayla, in the Yaylas, they do have large central areas to keep their animals in, which they then put within the enclosure, which are made out of stone. But but there's obviously no evidence of that there. But maybe you've just got the houses and not the wider aspects of the.
I mean, so we need isotopes results, and without isotope results, it's making that comparison is very difficult. But I have some ideas, but there's no clue, of course. There's this.
Please share your ideas.
Little clues. For example, in Aşıklı people, they are very motivated on the caprin and keeping the caprin. They don't know domestication when they just for them just a kind of food stock, it's keeping animals. But that time period, I mean, the early Aşıklı levels, we have more interaction. But when Balıklı is abundant, Aşıklı's interactions suddenly turn to very isolated society, community, you know. Probably, how do you call it, tedarikçi in English? Yeah, I forget. Supplier. Probably Balıklı was a kind of supplier of Aşıklı, and for giving that kind of, in early Aşıklı we have some marine shells, some other stuff, you know. And maybe they were maybe taking a kind of sheep from Aşıklı for or giving something else, you know.
But the burials there imply something a bit more permanent, don't they?
What?
The burials.
They are permanent, but they are more interaction with the
I see.
distant communities. But Aşıklı is probably not. That's why we need I mean, for the answer, we need the isotopes for the movement.
So they could be yes, exactly. So they could be a kind of a supply satellite.
Yeah, something like that, you know.
Yeah, well, it's possible.
And
that's the way that Hong Kong became so successful. Yeah. Please, sorry.
no, so, I mean, the other thing, we have lots of burials, you know, with a small building, you know. So they probably is not healthy as Aşık people. There are lots of infant burials, you know. We have already maybe 70 burials.
But infant mortality surely would have been similar across the two sites. I would be astonished if it weren't.
And I mean, if we compare the building by building, you know, we have a very small number of burials in Aşıklı. We have 9 burials.
Yeah, well, that of course is because they're somewhere else in that case. I mean, people didn't stop dying.
Probably somewhere else. But I mean, again, you know,
interesting.
stuck in one building inside, you know, everywhere, put it inside.
But there's no men at Aşıklı there, and you can't.
Yeah.
Unless it's a woman owned
I mean, presumably Balukla was just a more marginal location for a.
Yeah, it is also, yeah.
And Ashukla, and therefore it only lasted 150, 200 years by comparison with 1,000.
Yeah, and also is the building floor in Aşıklı, we have, I mean, in şeyi unuttum bu sefer, özenli, özenli bir şeyi özenli yapmak.
Deliberately? Deliberately or
yes, deliberately, they use the nice materials, the clay, but in the Balıklı floor they use the marsh, you know, and they're just putting and more flexible architectural mentality they have.
Presumably, you've opened up a smaller area at Balukla, haven't you? I mean, are you still digging there?
I mean, yes, we're still digging. When they start, both sides, I think it was the same size, you know, at the beginning. So it's Aşıklı people is much more focused on sustainability, probably we can say that. And Balıklı people is not that much focused on sustainability.
Well, this is the obvious point about Çatalhöyük as well, isn't it? It's they must have very strong forms of social control.
Yes,
to get that level, that level of regimentation,
radical egalitarianism.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would stress the social control side. I don't think it was an easy place to live at all. I think the rules were very tough indeed.
It is.
Yeah.
Probably in Aşıklı there were. I mean. More, I mean, it's very, I don't want to say bigots, but bigotry or something like that. But something like this, you know.
Well, exactly. The ritual and religious sanctions must have been very strong indeed to create that kind of of society in those days. Do you have any sense of the economic redistribution of goods at all in these sites? Because it's something that they're arguing about with regard to Çatalhöyük at the moment. I don't know whether you've got any sense of how they've compared.
So we have very few the finds. We have, I mean, Aşıklı, for example, we have less finds, you know. Balıklı is we have more findings, you know. Okay, it's a big contrast.
Right.
And also the finds, the only bones, forget to say in English. Bız ne bu bıza kemik bızlara. Okay, it's bone
Marrow? Not very marrow.
Okay, some bone tools. They're all these similar, but they're different. For example, we have the typical kind of balıklı kind of the ground stones, and in Aşıklı we have less ground stones that time period. You know. But in agricultures, the more tense in Aşıklı that time, and balıklı not that much. You know, agriculture activities. Lesser.
And what about the more contemporary aspects? What about the bulldozer? How did that happen? Did the bulldozer come in after you started looking at the site and said you were looking for treasure, or?
I mean, we discovered the site, and then we went to the museum, and then museum put in the list of in the first degree culture heritage area, and then 15 July coup attempt happened the next year, and then after that coup attempt, you know, the government not allowed to use dynamite for taking stone. So the local authorities, you know,
I think I know what you're going to say, but carry on. Yes.
Yeah, the local authorities, they decided to duck these sites, you know, for taking stones. But they probably know, you know, what they were doing.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. This source of spoliation, yeah. I thought you were going to say treasure, because I remember
it is for treasure.
But for stones rather than gold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I remember I was with a museum director in the coast in Sinop, and there was a very beautiful Roman marble block that was going to be used for sculpture, but nobody had started it yet. And so it was an absolutely perfect large cube. But when I said to the museum director, look, this will be great for the museum exhibition because you can show where your statues come from. But he said, that's a good idea. I'll send a boat round. And then the next day, there was nobody in sight. The next day we went back to prepare a boat, and it had been smashed to pieces.
Smashed
to pieces, yeah.
Not even disappeared.
Not even smashed to pieces. Just because they assumed that if the museum director and this guy were looking at the block, there must be gold hidden within it. Yeah. And they were so unthinking that they didn't realize that
it's a one-piece marble.
Yes, it was absolutely. It must have weighed a lot, just a one-piece marble. Anyway, so that's. But also there are lots of examples in Çatalhöyük of people raiding the mounds, but here they're raiding them because of the old mix of clay within the mounds, which is very good to stop the rain coming into their flat roofs. But after they've taken the mud, they get very, very worried because they don't like disturbing the bones of the people who lived in the mounds. And so there are all sorts of stories about the way that the people who disturbed these skeletons, that they fell off their tractors, their wives died, and they became ill, and they never had a good harvest again. All sorts of misfortune. So so the locals themselves, if they're left alone, probably the default position is they leave them broadly alone. They don't like smashing through them. But of course, the municipality don't care if they're coming from outside, they smash through them anyway. So I'm just wondering whether it was the local people who took the stones away, because that would be quite unusual if it was actually the local village. What was it?
I mean, this is a kind of organized looting activities
Oh,
for using the coup
yeah,
attempt
if it was
rules.
organized, yeah, it was organized. But nevertheless, I mean, it would be very interesting to ask the local villagers if these were local bulldozer men, what happened to them? It's probably they'll say, oh yes, the wheel fell off the bulldozer and the guy had an accident and he hasn't worked since. That's a normal kind of
I
story.
mean, this village is very famous for looting.
Ah, there are some like that.
Yeah,
Okay, and what sites are they looting around the village?
I mean,
Looting.
there are lots of the Selçuklu and the Bronze Age and the sites or some other stuff, you know. And they always,
Well, look, you must get an anthropologist there and talk to them and find out all the stories that they tell about what happens after they loot, because their misfortune is only one of them. There are all sorts of other ones, complicated stories, folkloric stories about different figures appearing and talisman,
It is.
which you've got to, get, first of all,
unrealistic.
Well, but they're fascinating stories. They form a part of the way that the ancient remains are absorbed into past communities. So to understand the relationship between the past and the present, these are very, very important.
This is a good part, but there are some other, it's very surrealistic, stories. Not never happen, but the motivating the others make I mean being looters,
Yes.
Thank you very much. I have to go now, but thank you.
Absolutely.
Terrific,
Any more
terrific talk.
Any more questions? Thank you very much indeed for this marvelous talk,
Thank you.
and much good fortune for your researches in the future.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,